Consider this chilling fact. Ted Bundy, one of America's most notorious serial killers, was also a law student, a crisis hotline volunteer, and a charming, good-looking man. On the surface, he was the epitome of the American dream, a charismatic individual who could easily blend into any crowd. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, there lurked a darkness that few could fathom. Bundy was not just a law-abiding citizen who helped people in crisis, he was a monster hiding in plain sight. His dual life was a masterful masquerade, a terrifying performance that fooled everyone around him. This was a man who could easily switch from being a caring friend to a cold-blooded predator, a man whose charm was as deadly as his intentions. His public persona and his secret life stood in stark contrast to each other, a macabre dance of deception and horror. Bundy's life was a terrifying paradox, a blend of the ordinary and the monstrous. The seeds of Bundy's terrifying future were sown in his turbulent childhood. In the heart of Burlington, Vermont, in the year 1946, Theodore Robert Bundy was born to Eleanor Louise Cowell, an unwed mother. His early years were marked by a complex familial situation. To avoid the societal scorn associated with illegitimacy, Bundy was raised to believe his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his older sister. A decade later, the truth unraveled. Bundy discovered his birth certificate and with it the harsh reality of his illegitimate birth. This revelation sparked an intense rage and sense of betrayal within him, emotions that would later fuel his horrific acts of violence. Bundy's childhood was not just marked by familial deception, it bore the first signs of his violent tendencies. He was known to set traps for others to fall into, demonstrating a sadistic pleasure in inflicting pain. He also showed an early fascination with knives, a chilling foreshadowing of the brutality to come. His adolescence was equally unsettling. Bundy was described as socially awkward, often struggling to relate to his peers. He reported feelings of detachment, like he didn't fit in. This alienation was compounded by his discovery that he was adopted. The feelings of rejection and confusion that stemmed from these experiences further fueled Bundy's anger and resentment. In high school, Bundy began to display manipulative behavior, using charm and deceit to get what he wanted. He was academically successful, but his actions suggested a darker side. He would often sneak out at night, peering into strangers' windows, the early signs of his voyeuristic tendencies. Despite these troubling signs, those around Bundy saw him as a model student and a promising young man with a bright future. Little did they know, the seeds of his terrifying future had already been sown, deeply rooted in his disturbed past. From these troubled beginnings, a monster was beginning to take shape. In the early 1970s, a series of horrifying murders began to rock the Pacific Northwest, marking the start of Bundy's reign of terror. The calm suburban life was shattered as young women began to disappear without a trace. An insidious predator was on the loose, lurking in the shadows, and his name was Ted Bundy. Bundy was no ordinary criminal. He was a man of charm and charisma, a wolf in sheep's clothing, using his allure to draw his victims into his lethal trap. He had an uncanny knack for appearing harmless, even vulnerable. Often feigning injury or disability, he would ask unsuspecting women for help. Once they were within his grasp, the mask would fall away, revealing the monster beneath. The first known victim was Joni Lenz, a student at the University of Washington. Bundy broke into her apartment in the dead of night, leaving her brutally assaulted but miraculously alive. Unfortunately, the ones who followed were not so lucky. Bundy's modus operandi was chillingly consistent. The women were young, attractive, and bore a striking resemblance to each other with their long, dark hair parted in the middle. After luring them into his car, Bundy would incapacitate them, drive them to a secluded location, and then unleash his violent fantasies. His acts were not just those of a killer, but of a sadist, who derived pleasure from the pain and fear of his victims. As the body count grew, so did the terror. The women of the Pacific Northwest lived in constant fear, never knowing if they might be the next target of this unseen predator. Yet Bundy remained elusive, his charm and cunning allowing him to blend into society without raising suspicion. Even as the police scrambled to connect the dots, Bundy was always one step ahead, leaving behind a trail of death and devastation. But as the saying goes, every reign of terror has its end, and Bundy's was no exception. Unbeknownst to him, the net was closing in. However, as the saying goes, it's always darkest before the dawn, and for the people of the Pacific Northwest, the darkest hours were yet to come. Bundy's murderous spree was just beginning. Bundy's reign of terror would not go unchecked, but even capture couldn't hold him for long. In the summer of '75, Theodore Bundy found himself ensnared by the law. His first arrest came in the quiet town of Granger, Utah, where a routine traffic stop led to the discovery of suspicious items in his car. However, Bundy was no easy catch. He was a chameleon, a master at blending in, and his charm served as a deadly weapon in evading justice. Within the confines of his cell, Bundy began to plot his escape. In the fall of '77, the opportunity presented itself. During a preliminary hearing, Bundy requested to visit the courthouse library to research his defense. Unshackled and unguarded, he leapt from a second-story window, disappearing into the Aspen wilderness. 6 days later, he was recaptured, but Bundy's taste for freedom was far from quenched. His second escape was even more daring. Squeezing through a hole in the ceiling of his cell, Bundy found himself free once again. This time, there was no swift recapture. Bundy fled to Florida, blending into the crowd as a man named Chris Hagen. In Florida, the monster inside Bundy stirred once more. The Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University became the stage for his nightmarish return. 2 young women lost their lives that night and 3 others were left brutally injured. Despite his attempts to remain hidden, Bundy's days of freedom were numbered. A mere month later he was apprehended once more. But the damage had been done. His escape and subsequent murders had added a chilling new chapter to his reign of terror. Bundy proved that he was not just a killer, but a master of evasion and manipulation. His ability to elude capture, even in the face of mounting evidence, is a haunting reminder of his cunning and ruthlessness. Bundy's story is not just a tale of murder but also of deception and escape, a dark testament to the depths of human depravity. Bundy's time was running out, and justice was closing in. As the trial of Ted Bundy approached, the nation held its collective breath. One of the most notorious serial killers in American history was about to face the ultimate reckoning. The trial was nothing short of a spectacle. Bundy, with his unsettling charm and law school training, decided to represent himself in court. He was seen shuffling through legal documents, cross-examining witnesses, and even proposing to a woman who would later become his wife, all while on trial for the most horrific of crimes. His antics, however, did little to sway the jury. The evidence was overwhelming. Bundy's bite marks matched those found on one of his victims, a damning piece of evidence that was relatively new to forensics at the time. His former girlfriend, Elizabeth Klopfer, testified against him, providing key evidence that tied him to several crime scenes. Despite the mounting evidence, Bundy remained defiant, insisting on his innocence and accusing the authorities of a conspiracy against him. Yet the jury was unpersuaded. After a grueling 4-day deliberation, they returned with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Bundy was sentenced to death, a verdict that seemed to shock him despite the gravity of his crimes. He would spend the next 9 years on death row, making futile appeals and shocking confessions in a desperate bid to extend his life. As the sun rose on January 24, 1989, Bundy was led to the electric chair. He was 32 years old. His last words were a mumbled apology, a far cry from the confident man who had once held court in a room full of horrified spectators. In the end, Ted Bundy met his fate in the electric chair, leaving behind a legacy of terror that still haunts America. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath a charming facade, a warning that evil can exist where we least expect it. Bundy's story is not just about the man, but about the society that produced him. Ted Bundy's life and crimes, a chilling saga of charm juxtaposed with ruthless brutality, left an indelible mark on American society. His story continues to intrigue not merely as a tale of gruesome murders, but as an exploration into the darkest depths of the human psyche. Bundy's actions were a wake-up call to the media and the public, shattering the illusory safety of suburban America. He brought the harsh reality of predatory violence into our living rooms, forever changing the way we perceive our neighbors and our neighborhoods. In the realm of criminal psychology, Bundy's case offered profound insights into the mind of a serial killer, leading to advancements in profiling techniques and investigative methodologies. He became the embodiment of a terrifying paradox: the killer next door, the monster behind a friendly face. Ted Bundy, a charming man and a ruthless killer, remains one of the most chilling figures in American criminal history.